The first question I'm looking at here was, how has your work with Bread impacted your life and your ministry? For me, it has really made my ministry. I have always had a heart for justice, and I always believed that that's what we were called to do. So that part of it has made me able to live out what I believe is my faith history. Um, what is the most memorable story I have from my involvement with Bread? Um, in late 2015, I got a call one day from the organizer, Rob, and he said that um, our safety director here in the city of Columbus was going to go ahead and just implement an initiative that we had been working on for over a year. And I found that so interesting. I just said, how could he possibly do that without ever getting back to us or anything like that? But it did turn out that he, at that point, the safety director, was very engaged in wanting to make this happen. And so when we actually met with him, he was really going to go ahead and do it. But what we were able to do, even before we actually got to that point where he was going to work further on his action to get it done, we actually got to go and see one of these sessions done. It's called a call-in session to try to do a violence reduction project by getting the community involved. So that was my most memorable story, was the fact this guy was just going to do it without even telling us. That was like not likely to happen. It still hasn't happened, but it was still an interesting story. It was funny to me. Um, the first Nehemiah action that I attended, honestly, it's been so many years. It's probably 2006 or 2007, and I can't even remember what the issue was back then. What the problem was that we were going to offer to solve. What I was most impressed with, though, was the amount of people that were there and the amount of people that were committed to making a change, and to making a difference in the city of Columbus. Once I attended my first Nehemiah action, I became as engaged as I could, because back then I was still working, so whenever I could take a day off and go to a hearing or work on something, I would. But at that point, I couldn't do much more than that. So it was just great to have a bunch of people that cared about justice together. Let's see. Uh, Again, this is like the most exciting part of the first Nehemiah. The action that I attended was the number of people that really cared about justice. I barely remember, like I said, what happened with regard to the issue. I just know that they had people up there that were answering questions and that we were trying to persuade to take a good action, to change the way that we do things here in Columbus or in Franklin County. Now, in what ways have I been involved with Bread? I've been a team member for many years. That's how I started out in Bread. 10 years ago, I started being a team member. I've always been that. As a result, I'm also a network member. I've been on a research committee since I retired. I immediately became engaged in research committees. And when it comes to memorable moments from my involvement, being here has taught me how to take action in other ways. And so, for example, because I was involved with Bread and we had a big payday lending thing going on where we were working with a whole coalition of people all over the state of Ohio, it was the first time I ever went to the State House and actually sat in for a hearing. And that to me made me feel like I was being a true citizen, not only of our faith community, but also of our community itself. There's a certain engagement that you really should be involved in if you really care about democracy. So my early work with Bread really has just taught me this is what democracy really does look like. It's a very common thing that happens now in a time when things feel like they might be jeopardized. In particular, lots of gains in justice, where we have a situation where more people have health care and things like that. These are all concerns that people stay awake at night over. And that's kind of been what my history's been like. I've also met some engaging and fascinating public officials I would never have thought I could really have a relationship with or care much about. It's turned out that they too care about justice. And so they always say in politics you never, and this is something I've heard here, that you never know who's going to be your enemy or your friend the next time around, and it's really turned out to be quite true.